Have you ever found yourself standing on the edge of a breakthrough, just about to step into something new, but something inside you feels like it's falling apart? You know what's coming could change everything, but the pressure, the struggles, and the doubts are piling up faster than ever. It feels like everything you've worked for, everything you've hoped for, is being threatened in the very moments before it happens. That feeling, when you're on the brink of something big and yet everything seems to be falling apart, is not just a coincidence. It's a sign that you are on the verge of your breakthrough. And it's also a sign that you need to be spiritually ready. In life, before every major breakthrough, there comes a testing. Billy Graham often spoke about how faith in God is never just about enjoying the rewards. It's about enduring the trials, standing firm through the storms, and learning to trust God, even when things don't make sense. It's easy to believe in God when everything is going well. It's easy to praise Him when you're walking on cloud nine. But true spiritual strength is built in the moments of hardship, and the enemy knows that if he can break you before your breakthrough, he can rob you of your victory. This tension you're feeling, the one where your dreams feel closer than ever, but the obstacles feel greater than ever, is not a sign that you're going in the wrong direction. No, it's a sign that you are exactly where God wants you to be. It's in these moments of intense pressure that your faith is being refined. It's in these moments of uncertainty that your reliance on God is being deepened. The testing of your faith is never comfortable, but it's necessary. God is preparing you for something greater than you can even imagine, but first, you must pass through the fire. And the fire isn't there to destroy you. It's there to purify you. Billy Graham often reminded us that the Christian walk isn't a smooth, effortless journey. If you've been called to greatness, if you've been chosen to carry a powerful message, the road will be challenging. You will face obstacles, setbacks, and moments when it feels like you've been abandoned. But remember this, you are never truly alone. God doesn't bring you to a place of potential only to leave you stranded. He is with you even in the hardest moments. He is strengthening you, molding you, and getting you ready for the breakthrough that's coming. The Bible tells us in James 1:2-4, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." That's the truth we need to hold on to in times of testing. The trials we face are not meant to break us. They are meant to build us. God is using the pressure to create perseverance in us, to refine our character, and to make us spiritually strong. But let's be honest, when you're in the middle of the storm, it's hard to see the purpose behind the pain. It's hard to understand why things are falling apart when all you want is for things to finally come together. That's when the enemy loves to whisper lies in your ear. You're not good enough, he says. You'll never make it. God has forgotten you. These lies are designed to shake your faith, to make you doubt the promises God has spoken over your life. But the truth is that God is still working even when you don't see it. Your breakthrough is coming, but first, you must endure the testing. And if you can hold on, if you can stay spiritually ready, you will see the fruit of your faith. You see, breakthroughs are not just about the outcome, they're about the process. The moment when you experience the breakthrough, when everything falls into place and you see the manifestation of God's promises, will feel amazing. But the true transformation happens in the moments leading up to it. Instead, it fueled his passion to spread the gospel even further. In fact, many of his letters, which are now part of the New Testament, were written while he was imprisoned. His breakthrough came in the form of the spread of the gospel, which reached nations and transformed lives. But that breakthrough came only after years of hardship and suffering. Just like Joseph, Moses, and Paul, we will face trials before our breakthrough. But we must remember that our breakthrough is not defined by our circumstances. It's defined by our faith in God. If we can learn to persevere, to trust God even in the midst of hardship, we will see that our breakthrough is not only coming, it is already in the works. God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating the perfect timing, and preparing us for what He has in store. Before your breakthrough, you will face tests, challenges, and obstacles. But don't be discouraged. These trials are not meant to break you. They are meant to build you. Each difficulty you face is an opportunity for growth, for spiritual maturity, and for a deeper dependence on God. The breakthrough is coming, but first, God is preparing you. He is refining you, strengthening you, and making you spiritually ready for what's ahead. So, when you face trials, don't give up. Don't lose heart. Instead, embrace the process. Know that the pain you're feeling is not in vain. It's part of God's perfect plan to bring you into the breakthrough He has prepared for you. Trust that God is faithful. Trust that He is at work, and know that your breakthrough is just around the corner. You are being prepared for something greater than you can imagine. And when it comes, it will be worth every moment of struggle you've faced. There's something profound about the moments right before a breakthrough. In the midst of the struggle, the waiting, and the uncertainty, there's often a quiet whisper, a voice deep within that says, "Keep going, don't give up now." Your breakthrough is closer than you think. But it's not always easy to hear that voice when everything around you seems to be falling apart. The pressures mount, the doubts grow louder, and the frustration of feeling stuck can make you question everything. But here's the truth. When you're on the verge of something big, that's when the enemy works hardest to distract and discourage you. It's in these moments of intense pressure that your faith is tested the most. Billy Graham often emphasized the importance of spiritual readiness, especially during times of trial. He understood that God doesn't always take us out of our struggles immediately. In fact, sometimes God allows us to go through difficult seasons because He knows it's in those moments that our faith will be tested, refined, and strengthened. The Apostle James speaks about this in his letter, urging believers to consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, James 1:2. That's a hard thing to do when you're in the middle of a battle. But James is not saying we should be happy about the hardship itself. Rather, he's saying that we should rejoice because we know that the trials are producing something in us, something that can only be developed through pressure. The process of spiritual growth is not always linear. It's not a straight path where you just keep moving forward without any obstacles. Instead, it's often more like a winding road with twists, turns, and bumps along the way. And during those times when you feel the weight of your circumstances, when the breakthrough seems so far off, that's when it's most important to remember that God is working in you, even if you can't see it. What you're going through is not random. It's part of a larger plan that God has for your life. The breakthrough you're waiting for isn't just about the end result. It's about what you're becoming as you go through the process. Take the example of the process of refining gold. The gold is heated up to extreme temperatures until the impurities rise to the surface, where they can be removed. This process is painful for the gold, but it's the only way to bring out its true value and beauty. In the same way, God allows us to go through the fires of life, not to destroy us, but to refine us. Every trial, every moment of pain is an opportunity for God to purify our hearts and strengthen our faith. We see this principle clearly in the story of David. David, the young shepherd boy who was anointed by God to be king, didn't step into his position of authority right away. In fact, before David became king, he went through a season of intense hardship. He was pursued by King Saul, who was jealous of him, and was forced to live as a fugitive for years. During this time, David faced constant danger, uncertainty, and isolation. Yet in this period of hardship, David's character was being shaped. He learned to trust in God's timing, to rely on God's protection, and to develop a heart of humility and integrity. It was in the wilderness, not in the palace, that David learned how to be a king. David's breakthrough came when he was finally crowned as king of Israel. But it wasn't just the position that made David great. It was the man he had become during the process. His time in the wilderness prepared him for the challenges of leadership. Had he been made king too soon, he wouldn't have been ready for the responsibilities and pressures that came with the throne. David's story teaches us an important lesson. The trials you face today are preparing you for the calling God has on your life. The wilderness seasons are not wasted. They are part of the journey that will bring you to your breakthrough. But what do you do when you feel like you're stuck in that waiting season, when the promise seems so far off? What do you do when the pain seems unbearable and the breakthrough feels unreachable? The answer is simple. Keep moving forward. Keep trusting. Keep praying. Even when you can't see the way forward, trust that God is at work behind the scenes, orchestrating everything for your good. It's in these moments that your faith is being built. It's easy to trust God when everything is going well, but it's in the struggle, in the waiting, and in the pain that you learn to trust Him in a deeper way. The Bible is full of examples of people who had to wait for their breakthroughs. Consider Abraham, the father of faith. God promised Abraham that he would be the father of many nations, but Abraham had to wait for 25 years before that promise was fulfilled. Can you imagine what it must have been like for him, year after year, waiting for the fulfillment of God's promise? There must have been times when Abraham doubted, when he wondered if God had forgotten him. But through it all, Abraham remained faithful. And when the time was right, God fulfilled His promise, and Abraham became the father of Isaac, the child through whom God's covenant was established. Abraham's journey shows us that God's timing is perfect. We may not understand why we have to wait, or why we go through certain trials, but we can trust that God knows what He's doing. He is preparing us for something greater, something that will bring glory to His name. It's easy to become discouraged when the breakthrough doesn't come quickly, but remember that God is not slow in keeping His promises. His timing is perfect, and when the breakthrough comes, it will be worth the wait. Another powerful example of waiting for a breakthrough is found in the life of Job. Job, a man described as a blameless and upright, who lost everything: his wealth, his family, his health. Yet in the midst of his suffering, Job refused to curse God. He questioned God, but he never turned his back on Him. Job's breakthrough didn't come until after he had endured immense pain and loss. But when it did come, God restored everything to Job and more. Job's story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, God is with us. Even when we don't understand what's happening, He is working in our lives. The key to enduring the waiting season is to remember that God is faithful. He is not far away. He is with you every step of the way, even when you don't feel His presence. The breakthrough may seem far off, but it is coming. And when it comes, it will be greater than you can imagine. God is working in your life right now, even in the midst of your trials. He is preparing you for something greater. Trust Him. Keep moving forward, and know that your breakthrough is just around the corner. The road to your breakthrough isn't always smooth, and often the harder you fight, the more intense the battle becomes. This is something many people don't understand when they begin their walk with God. We live in a world that promises instant results and quick fixes, but God doesn't operate on the world's timetable. Instead, He has a plan for each of us that is much greater than we can imagine. And sometimes that plan includes hardship, struggle, and waiting. Why does God allow us to face such intense struggles before He brings our breakthrough? Why must we endure pain and suffering on the way to our promise? The answer lies in the nature of God's refining process. Billy Graham often spoke of how God uses our trials to build character and strengthen our faith. It's easy to trust God when everything is going well, but when the storm clouds roll in and the winds begin to howl, that's when our faith is truly tested. God knows that before He can trust us with great blessings, we must first prove that we can endure. Just as a farmer cannot harvest his crop before it has matured, God allows us to go through seasons of growth and refinement. These seasons prepare us for the breakthroughs that lie ahead. In the Bible, we see this principle repeatedly. The Israelites, for example, were promised a land of milk and honey, a land of abundance and blessing. But before they could enter that land, they had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. It wasn't because God had forgotten them, nor because He wanted to punish them. It was because He needed to prepare them. During those 40 years, the Israelites faced hunger, thirst, and danger. But God was using those challenges to teach them how to trust Him, how to rely on His provision, and how to walk in faith. God knew that the promised land would not be enough if they weren't spiritually prepared to live in it. The breakthrough of entering the land of promise was not just about receiving blessings. It was about becoming the people who could handle those blessings. The wilderness was not the end for the Israelites. It was the preparation for the end. Their breakthrough came after they had learned to trust God in their hardships. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the hardest seasons in our lives are not meant to defeat us, but to prepare us. If we can learn to trust God through our struggles, if we can hold on to His promises even when we can't see a way forward, we will be spiritually ready for the breakthrough He has prepared for us. It's important to understand that God's timing is perfect. When we're going through difficult times, we may feel as though the breakthrough is never going to come. But God knows exactly what He is doing. He's not late, and He's not unaware of our pain. He is allowing us to go through the process of refinement because He knows that the breakthrough will be worth it. Just as a diamond must endure intense heat and pressure before it becomes a brilliant jewel, we must go through the fire of trial to become who God has called us to be. Take, for instance, the story of the prophet Elijah. Elijah was a man of great faith, and he performed incredible miracles, including calling down fire from heaven to defeat the false prophets of Baal. Yet after this great victory, Elijah found himself running for his life, hiding in a cave, afraid for his very survival. In his fear and loneliness, Elijah could have given up, but God spoke to him in a still small voice, reminding him that He was still with him. Elijah's breakthrough didn't come from the fire and the storm. It came in the quiet whisper of God's presence. Elijah's story teaches us that even in our darkest moments, God is near. Sometimes our breakthrough isn't in the grand moments of triumph, but in the stillness, when God's voice speaks into our hearts and reminds us of His faithfulness. Another powerful story of preparation for breakthrough is found in the life of Esther. Esther was a young Jewish girl who became queen of Persia. But before she could step into her role as a leader, she had to face an enormous challenge. The lives of her people were at stake, and Esther was afraid. But through prayer and fasting, she sought God's guidance and found the courage to approach the king, risking her life to save her people. Esther's breakthrough didn't come immediately. It came after a season of preparation, prayer, and sacrifice. Her willingness to trust God with her life, even in the face of fear, led to the salvation of her people. Esther's story teaches us that breakthroughs often come after we've gone through the refining process. It's through prayer, obedience, and trusting God with everything that we are able to step into the role He has called us to play. The breakthrough may not come when we expect it, but when it does, it will be greater than we could have imagined. Sometimes before God brings our breakthrough, He asks us to surrender things that we hold dear. This is often the most challenging part of the process. Whether it's our plans, our dreams, or our sense of control, God often asks us to let go so that He can give us something better. This surrendering of control is not a sign of weakness, but of faith. It's saying to God, I trust You more than I trust my own understanding. I trust You more than I trust my own plans. This act of surrender is not easy, but it's necessary for spiritual growth. It's in surrendering that we position ourselves to receive the breakthrough that God has for us. Billy Graham often emphasized that God's way is higher than our way. We may not always understand why we go through difficult times, but we can trust that God is working everything together for our good. He is refining us, preparing us, and strengthening us for the breakthrough that is coming. The pain and struggles we face today are not in vain. They are part of God's divine plan to bring us into something greater. If you are in a season of struggle, don't despair. Know that God is at work behind the scenes. He is refining your character, building your faith, and preparing you for the breakthrough that is just ahead. Hold on to God's promises, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Trust that He is faithful, and that He will bring your breakthrough in His perfect timing. The breakthrough you're waiting for may not come when you expect, but it is coming. And when it does, you will look back on this season and see how God used it to prepare you for something far greater than you could have imagined. Trust the process, lean on God's strength, and believe that your breakthrough is closer than you think. The storm may seem fierce right now, but it will pass. And when it does, you'll be standing in the victory that God has prepared for you. When you find yourself in the midst of a trial, it can feel as though the weight of the world is pressing down on you. Everything around you seems uncertain, and the path forward feels unclear. During these times, it's important to remember that God often uses these seasons of discomfort to prepare us for the breakthroughs He has in store. The waiting and the struggle are not signs that God has abandoned you. Rather, they are part of His divine plan to refine you, to shape you, and to build your faith in ways that comfort and ease never could. Billy Graham often spoke about the importance of persevering through trials and testing. He reminded us that it's during our struggles that our faith is built and our character is refined. It's easy to walk with God when everything is going well, but it's in the times of adversity that we learn to rely on Him more deeply. These challenges help us develop the spiritual resilience needed to handle the breakthroughs and blessings that God has promised us. One of the most significant aspects of preparation for breakthrough is developing patience. Patience is not merely waiting passively. It is waiting with purpose. It's about learning to trust God in the unknown and choosing to walk in faith even when you can't see the outcome. It's during these times that we have the opportunity to grow in spiritual maturity. When we develop patience, we align our hearts with God's timing, knowing that He sees the bigger picture and is orchestrating everything for our good. In the Bible, we see countless examples of people who had to wait for their breakthrough, each of them facing trials that tested their faith in God's plan. One such example is the story of Joseph. Joseph, as a young man, was given a dream by God that he would one day rise to a place of great influence, but his journey to that position was not immediate. Instead, Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused of a crime, and thrown into prison. For years, he seemed to be stuck in a cycle of injustice and hardship. Yet through all of this, Joseph never lost sight of the fact that God had a plan for his life. Joseph's breakthrough came when he was finally elevated to a position of power in Egypt, where he was able to save his family and an entire nation from famine. His story is a powerful reminder that no matter how difficult your journey may be, God's promises will come to pass. Joseph's patience and faith during his years of hardship were key to his ability to handle the blessings that came with his breakthrough. He didn't allow bitterness or resentment to control him. And as a result, he was able to step into the purpose God had for him when the time was right. Similarly, the story of the Israelites and their journey through the wilderness teaches us about the value of patience and trusting God during times of waiting. The Israelites were promised the land of Canaan, a land flowing with milk and honey. Yet they had to endure a 40-year period of wandering in the wilderness before they could claim that promise. This wasn't because God was unwilling to fulfill His promise. Rather, it was because the Israelites needed time to grow spiritually. Their hearts were filled with fear, doubt, and rebellion, and God needed to refine them before they could step into the promise. In the wilderness, they learned to depend on God for their daily needs, to trust in His provision, and to follow His leading. When we are in the wilderness seasons of life, it can be tempting to feel discouraged, to wonder if God has forgotten us, or to question whether we'll ever see the fulfillment of the promises He's given us. But it's in these times that God is doing His deepest work in us. The wilderness is where we learn to trust God, even when we can't see the way forward. It's where we learn that He is faithful, even when circumstances seem to say otherwise. Another aspect of preparing for breakthrough is learning to let go of control. We live in a world that encourages us to take charge, to fix our problems, and to make things happen on our own. But when it comes to God's plan for our lives, it's not about us taking control. It's about surrendering to His will. But God is always working, even when we don't see immediate results. Just as a seed must be buried in the soil and go through a time of darkness before it can sprout and grow, so too must we go through our seasons of waiting and preparation before we can experience the breakthrough that God has planned for us. The wilderness is not a punishment. It's a place where God cultivates deep roots of faith in our hearts, teaching us to stand firm in His promises, regardless of our circumstances. One of the most important lessons we can learn in the wilderness is to trust God's timing. The wilderness teaches us that God's timing is perfect, even when it seems like we've been waiting forever. In the midst of trials, it's easy to grow impatient and try to take matters into our own hands. We may feel that the breakthrough is never coming or that God is taking too long to answer our prayers. But as we see in the Bible, God's timing is always right. When Joseph was in prison, he had no idea that his breakthrough would come through his interpretation of Pharaoh's dream, leading to his promotion and the fulfillment of God's promise to him. It was through his waiting, his patience, and his unwavering trust in God that Joseph was able to step into the role God had planned for him. Similarly, the story of David reminds us that God's timing is always perfect. David was anointed as king while he was still a young shepherd, but he had to wait many years before he actually took the throne. During this time, David faced many trials, including being hunted by King Saul, who was jealous of him. David could have taken matters into his own hands and killed Saul, but instead he chose to trust God's timing and wait for God to elevate him to the throne. Through these years of waiting, David grew in his character, in his trust in God, and in his ability to lead. His breakthrough came when God, in his perfect timing, removed Saul and placed David on the throne. The wilderness also teaches us the importance of relying on God's provision. During their time in the wilderness, the Israelites learned that they couldn't depend on their own resources. They had to rely on God for everything. God provided them with manna from heaven, quail to eat, and water from a rock. In the same way, God promises to provide for us during our wilderness seasons. We may not always understand how He will provide or when, but we can trust that He is faithful. Just as He provided for the Israelites in the wilderness, He will provide for us in our times of need. In the New Testament, we see this same theme of trusting in God's provision. Jesus, when teaching His disciples about faith, told them not to worry about their needs because God knows what they need before they even ask. Matthew 6:8. He reminded them that if God takes care of the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, how much more will He take care of His children? This is a powerful reminder that God is always watching over us, even when we are going through difficult seasons. He is our provider, our protector, and our sustainer. The wilderness is not a place where we are abandoned. It is a place where we learn to trust in God's provision and faithfulness. Another important lesson we learn in the wilderness is the power of obedience. During the 40 years that the Israelites spent wandering in the desert, God repeatedly called them to obey His commandments. He knew that their obedience was a key factor in their spiritual growth and in their preparation for the promised land. It was in the wilderness that they learned the importance of following God's instructions, even when it didn't make sense to them. In the same way, God calls us to obey Him during our times of waiting, even when we don't fully understand the reasons behind His commands. It is through our obedience that we grow closer to Him and become more spiritually ready to receive the breakthrough He has for us. Obedience during the wilderness season is not always easy, but it is always worth it. When we choose to follow God's will, even in the midst of hardship, we align ourselves with His purpose and prepare our hearts for the breakthrough that is coming. Billy Graham often said that obedience to God is the key to experiencing His blessings. When we obey God, we show Him that we trust His plan for our lives and that we are willing to follow His lead, no matter where it takes us. Finally, the wilderness is a place where we can encounter God in a deeper way. It is in the midst of our struggles and challenges that we often experience the closeness of God's presence. Just as Moses encountered God in the burning bush while he was in the wilderness, we too can encounter God in powerful ways during our own wilderness seasons. The wilderness is where God reveals Himself to us in ways that we may not experience during times of peace and prosperity. It is in the wilderness that we come to understand that God is not just a distant figure who watches over us from afar. He is a personal God who walks with us through every season of life. The wilderness may feel like a place of isolation, but it is actually a place where God draws near to us. It is in these moments of solitude and struggle that we often hear God's voice more clearly and experience His presence more profoundly. When everything else in life is stripped away, we are left with nothing but God, and in those moments we learn that He is enough. As you navigate your own wilderness season, remember that it is not a sign that God has abandoned you. Instead, it is a time of preparation, a time for spiritual growth, and a time for God to refine you and strengthen your faith. The wilderness will not last forever, but the lessons you learn during this season will stay with you forever. Trust that God is working in you, even when it feels like nothing is happening. He is faithful, and He will bring you through the wilderness and into the breakthrough He has promised. There is something powerful about the process of breaking through that often goes unnoticed. When you're in the midst of waiting, it can feel like you're just stuck in a moment of frustration and longing, as if everything around you is standing still. But the truth is, while we may feel stuck, God is preparing us in ways we can't always see. There is an intentional work happening behind the scenes, a shaping and molding process that is setting the stage for your breakthrough. Billy Graham often spoke about the importance of persistence and how God uses the trials in our lives to strengthen us for the blessings that are to come. One of the most powerful things that he taught was that we must not give up during the waiting. Waiting is not a passive experience. It is an active one. It is a time of preparation, of building our spiritual muscles, and of growing deeper in our relationship with God. The breakthroughs we long for will not come to us in the way we expect, and the process of breakthrough may involve suffering, frustration, and uncertainty. But it is these very things that God uses to build our character and faith. In the Bible, we find numerous examples of people who experienced waiting before their breakthroughs. One of the most powerful examples is found in the story of Abraham. Abraham was promised by God that he would be the father of many nations. But for years, Abraham and his wife Sarah remained childless. They waited and waited and waited for the fulfillment of God's promise. At times, it seemed as though the promise would never come to pass. The waiting was long and the doubts began to creep in. Yet it was in the waiting that Abraham's faith was strengthened. His trust in God grew deeper, and his understanding of God's timing expanded. At one point, Abraham even tried to take matters into his own hands, as many of us do when we feel impatient. He had a son with Sarah's maidservant Hagar, because he felt that perhaps this was the way God would fulfill his promise. But this was not the path that God had intended for him. God had a perfect plan, and the promise would be fulfilled through Sarah, even though she was beyond childbearing age. It was through this long wait, this seemingly endless period of waiting and wondering, that Abraham's faith was tested and refined. When Isaac was finally born, it was a clear reminder that God's promises do not fail. What had seemed impossible became a beautiful reality. Abraham's story reminds us that when we go through seasons of waiting, God is not being slow or negligent. He is working in our hearts, and He is preparing us for the breakthrough that will come at the right time. Just as Abraham's faith was tested and strengthened, so too will our faith grow stronger in the waiting. Another key lesson from Abraham's story is that God's timing is perfect. We may feel that God is taking too long to answer our prayers, but we must remember that His timing is not bound by our limited perspective. His plans are greater than ours, and His understanding far exceeds anything we could imagine. We are called to trust in His perfect timing, even when the breakthrough seems distant or unreachable. In these moments of waiting, it's important to reflect on the truths of who God is. He is faithful. He is sovereign. He is good. The waiting is not a punishment, but a divine opportunity to grow in our relationship with Him. During this time, we learn to lean into His character and to trust that He will come through, just as He always has in the past. This is why it is so crucial to stay connected to God during these waiting periods. We need to draw near to Him in prayer, in His Word, and in worship. It is through these spiritual disciplines that we can strengthen our faith and remain hopeful for the breakthrough ahead. Billy Graham often reminded his audiences that breakthrough is not just about the end result. It's about how we grow in the process. It is about learning to trust in God, even when we can't see the way forward. It's about having the courage to keep going, to keep praying, and to keep believing, even when the circumstances around us seem to tell a different story. When we wait in faith, we are setting ourselves up for God to do something amazing in our lives. In the same way, we see this principle at work in the life of Moses. Moses spent years in exile in the wilderness before God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Moses likely questioned his calling and wondered if he would ever see the fulfillment of the promises God had made. He had spent decades in the desert, far from the place of destiny God had promised him. But during that time, Moses was being prepared. His character was being molded, and his trust in God was growing. It was in the desert that Moses encountered God in the burning bush, and it was there that God gave him the vision and courage to step into his calling. Just as Moses had to wait for God's timing, we too must wait for the right moment to step into the promises God has for us. The waiting time is not wasted time. It is a time of preparation. It is a time of refining. It is a time when God is preparing our hearts, our character, and our spirits to handle the blessings that are ahead. Moses' breakthrough came when God called him to lead the Israelites to freedom. But the process of waiting was necessary for him to be spiritually and mentally ready for that monumental task. When we look at these examples from the Bible, it becomes clear that waiting is a vital part of the spiritual journey. In the waiting, God teaches us to trust Him more deeply. He uses this time to prepare us for the breakthrough that is coming. It is not about being passive during this time. It is about being active in our faith. It is about continuing to pray, to trust, and to walk in obedience, even when we don't fully understand what God is doing. It is in the waiting that we discover the strength of our faith and learn to rely on God's faithfulness, even when things seem uncertain. Billy Graham often spoke of the need for persistence in our spiritual lives. He said that breakthroughs often come when we least expect them, and it is the consistent, faithful obedience during the waiting that prepares us for the moment when the breakthrough arrives. You might not see it now, but God is working on your behalf, even in the quiet moments of your waiting. He is preparing you for something greater, something beyond what you can imagine. When your breakthrough comes, you will look back and see that every step of the waiting, every moment of trial, every moment of questioning was a necessary part of God's perfect plan. You will realize that the waiting was not in vain, but it was a time of growth, strength, and spiritual deepening. God never wastes a moment in your life. Even in the waiting, He is working. So keep moving forward in faith, keep trusting, and keep praying. Your breakthrough is coming, and when it does, you'll see that the waiting was all worth it. As we continue to reflect on the process leading up to breakthrough, it's important to recognize that there's a deep spiritual battle that takes place before the blessings are fully realized. While we often focus on the breakthrough itself, we cannot overlook the fierce resistance that often rises up against us during the waiting. This resistance is not a sign that something is wrong. Rather, it's a sign that something powerful is on the horizon. The enemy knows that a breakthrough in your life will not only bring you closer to God, but will also impact the lives of others. And so he will try to discourage you, distract you, and derail you. This is why it's critical to be spiritually prepared for the battle that often precedes the breakthrough. Billy Graham frequently spoke of the spiritual warfare that takes place when God's people are about to experience something significant. When God is preparing to move in your life, the enemy will often rise up to oppose you. You may face doubt, fear, or unexpected challenges. You may feel overwhelmed as if the weight of the world is bearing down on you. But the truth is, these challenges are part of the refining process. They are not there to destroy you. They are there to strengthen you, to build your resilience, and to test your faith. The battle is real, but so is the victory that lies on the other side. It is during these spiritual battles that we must be vigilant and stand firm in our faith. In Ephesians 6:10-18, Paul speaks about the armor of God, reminding us that we are not fighting against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of evil. He tells us to put on the full armor of God so that we can stand firm against the schemes of the enemy. This armor includes the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the shoes of peace, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. It is through these spiritual tools that we can withstand the attacks of the enemy and remain steadfast as we wait for our breakthrough. During these times of resistance, it's easy to become discouraged and question whether we're on the right path. We may wonder if God has abandoned us or if our breakthrough will ever come. But it is precisely during these moments of doubt that we need to dig deeper into our faith. It's when we face resistance that our faith becomes stronger. Just as gold is refined by fire, our faith is refined through trials. God is not punishing us. He is preparing us. He is building our spiritual muscles, helping us to grow in strength and maturity. The trials we face are not signs that we are failing. They are signs that we are on the verge of something great. Billy Graham often said that the greatest breakthroughs come after the fiercest battles. He knew that the enemy would do everything in his power to keep God's people from stepping into the promises that God had for them. But he also knew that through God we have the power to overcome every obstacle. We are more than conquerors through Christ who gives us strength. And the key is to keep our eyes focused on God even when the battle seems intense. As long as we remain faithful and trust in His plan, we will emerge victorious. In the Old Testament, we see this spiritual battle vividly illustrated in the story of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was called by God to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. But as he began this great work, he faced intense opposition from his enemies. Sanballat and Tobiah mocked him, tried to intimidate him, and sought to undermine his efforts. But Nehemiah did not back down. He remained focused on the task at hand, trusting in God's strength and provision. He knew that the opposition was not personal. It was a spiritual battle. Nehemiah's response was to pray, to stay vigilant, and to keep building despite the challenges. Nehemiah's story is a powerful reminder that when God calls us to something, we will face resistance. There will be people, circumstances, and even doubts that try to discourage us. But we must not be moved. We must stand firm in our faith, knowing that the battle is not ours to fight alone. God is with us, and He will give us the strength to overcome every obstacle. When Nehemiah continued the work despite the opposition, the walls of Jerusalem were eventually rebuilt. It wasn't easy, but the victory was worth the struggle. In the New Testament, we see a similar theme in the life of Paul. Paul faced numerous trials, including imprisonments, beatings, shipwrecks, and betrayals, as he spread the message of Christ. But Paul never gave up. He knew that the resistance he faced was not just physical, it was spiritual. He knew that the enemy was trying to stop the spread of the gospel, and he refused to be deterred. Paul's strength came from his deep relationship with Christ, and it was this strength that enabled him to persevere through the hardest of trials. In 2 Corinthians 4:8-9, Paul writes, "We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." This verse encapsulates the spirit of perseverance that is required during times of spiritual battle. When we face resistance, it may feel as though we are being pressed from all sides. But as Paul reminds us, we are not crushed. We may be perplexed, but we are not in despair. We may be persecuted, but we are not abandoned. We may be struck down, but we are not destroyed. In Christ, we have the power to overcome every challenge that comes our way. The enemy may try to discourage us, to make us feel as though our breakthrough will never come. But we must stand firm in our faith. We must remind ourselves that the battle is not over, and that God is still working. We may not see the victory in the moment, but we can trust that God is doing something powerful in the spiritual realm. Our breakthrough is coming, but we must be spiritually prepared for the resistance that will come before it. Billy Graham often reminded his audience that the enemy's goal is to steal, kill, and destroy. But God's plan is to give us life, and life abundantly. It is through our faith, perseverance, and trust in God that we overcome the enemy's tactics and step into the breakthrough He has planned for us. So if you are facing resistance today, take heart. Know that the battle you are facing is a sign that something incredible is on the horizon. Keep praying. Keep pressing forward. Keep trusting in God's plan. Your breakthrough is coming, and the victory will be yours. As we continue to explore the journey before breakthrough, one of the most significant challenges we must confront is the temptation to give up. It's easy to become weary when progress seems slow, or when the promises God has made to us seem distant or even impossible. But the key to enduring through the waiting period and ultimately stepping into the breakthrough God has prepared for us is understanding the nature of perseverance and the role it plays in our spiritual growth. Perseverance is not just about enduring through tough times, it's about holding on to faith, trusting in God's goodness, and never losing sight of His promises. Billy Graham often emphasized that the road to breakthrough is not always a smooth one. There will be challenges, obstacles, and moments of doubt. But it is in these moments that our faith is tested and refined. If we learn to persevere, we will emerge stronger and more capable of handling the breakthrough that awaits us. In fact, it is through the act of perseverance that God prepares us for the blessings that are on the other side of our trials. One of the Bible's most profound teachings on perseverance comes from the book of James. In James 1:4, we read, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." This passage is counterintuitive to how we naturally view hardships. When we face difficulties, our first instinct is often to avoid them or to complain about them. But James encourages us to consider these trials as an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for our faith to be strengthened. Perseverance is not simply about pushing through difficult times. It's about choosing joy in the midst of them, because we understand that our faith is being refined, and that God is using this process to prepare us for something greater. When we face trials, we are given a unique opportunity to grow in endurance. And it is this endurance that strengthens us for the breakthrough God is preparing. When we think of perseverance, we often think of the heroes of the Bible who endured incredible hardships. One of the most powerful examples is the story of Job. Job's faith was tested in ways most of us can hardly imagine. He lost his wealth, his health, and his family, all in a short period of time. Yet through it all, Job refused to curse God. He continued to trust in God's plan, even when it seemed like everything was falling apart. Job's story is one of profound perseverance. Despite the unimaginable suffering he endured, he did not let go of his faith. And as a result, he was restored and blessed abundantly. Job's story reminds us that perseverance is not about avoiding pain or difficulty. It's about trusting God even when we don't understand why things are happening the way they are. Perseverance is about holding on to God's promises even when the road is rough and the outcome is unclear. It is through this kind of perseverance that we are prepared for the breakthrough that God has promised us. Another key lesson on perseverance comes from the Apostle Paul, who faced many trials in his ministry. He was beaten, imprisoned, shipwrecked, and rejected by many. Yet in his letters, Paul consistently encouraged believers to endure in their faith and never give up. In Romans 5:3-4, Paul writes, "Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope." Paul understood that suffering is a part of the Christian life, but he also understood that it is in the midst of suffering that God works in us to build perseverance, character, and hope. The key to perseverance, according to Paul, is having hope. Hope in the goodness of God, hope in His faithfulness, and hope in the breakthrough that is coming. Hope is what enables us to keep going when things seem impossible. It's the belief that no matter how difficult the journey, God is still at work and that He will bring us through to the other side. Billy Graham often spoke of the importance of holding on to hope in times of trial. He encouraged his audience to trust that God had a plan for their lives, and that no matter what they were going through, God would never leave them or forsake them. This hope is not just wishful thinking. It is a confident expectation that God will do what He has promised. As we persevere in faith, we must remember that the breakthrough we are waiting for is not just something that happens to us. It's something that God has already prepared for us. The breakthrough is part of His plan, and we can trust that it will come at the right time. In Hebrews 12:1-2, the author encourages us to throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. This passage reminds us that perseverance is a race. It is a long journey that requires focus, discipline, and endurance. We are called to keep our eyes on Jesus, who is the one who will sustain us through the race. He is the one who will give us the strength to continue when we feel like giving up. He is the one who will empower us to persevere and keep moving forward. When we are spiritually prepared for the breakthrough, we will find that perseverance becomes easier because our focus shifts from the difficulty of the situation to the goodness of God. We remember that God is with us every step of the way, and that His plan for us is always good. We trust that He will provide for us, guide us, and give us the strength to endure. It is in this trust that our perseverance grows, and it is through perseverance that we will see the breakthrough come. The enemy's greatest weapon is to cause us to lose hope. He wants us to believe that the breakthrough will never come, that we are stuck, and that God has forgotten about us. But we must remember that God's promises are true, and He will never leave us or forsake us. Even when things are difficult, we can have hope, knowing that God is faithful to complete the work He has started in us. Our breakthrough is coming, and it is through perseverance that we will reach it. As we continue on this journey of faith, let us remember that perseverance is not just about enduring the difficult times. It's about growing in faith, trusting in God's timing, and fixing our eyes on the hope that is found in Jesus Christ. Our breakthrough may be closer than we think, and the perseverance we develop during this time will enable us to handle the blessings that God is preparing for us. So don't give up. Keep pressing on. Your breakthrough is coming, and it will be worth the wait. As we come to the final section of this journey before breakthrough, it's crucial to understand the transformative power of perseverance, faith, and trust in God. There's one more critical step we must take before we fully walk into the promises God has for us, and that is learning to embrace God's timing. It's often in the waiting period, the period of challenge and resistance, that we find our hearts growing closer to God, our faith being tested, and our character being shaped. But when the breakthrough comes, it's not just a result of what we've done. It's a result of God's perfect timing. This is a powerful truth that we need to hold on to with all our hearts. Billy Graham frequently spoke about God's timing as an essential element in the fulfillment of His promises. He reminded us that while we may be in a hurry to see things come to fruition, God's timing is always perfect. It's not a matter of if God will act, but when. And it's during the waiting process that our faith is strengthened and our understanding of God's sovereignty deepens. Our breakthrough isn't about us controlling the timeline. It's about trusting that God knows the best time to release His promises into our lives. There's a powerful story in the Bible that highlights the importance of trusting in God's timing, and it's the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a son, but they didn't see that promise fulfilled for many years. Abraham was 75 years old when he received the promise, and Sarah was 65. They had to wait for 25 years before the child was born. During that time, they faced doubt, frustration, and even the temptation to take matters into their own hands. Sarah, unable to conceive, suggested that Abraham have a child with her servant, Hagar. Abraham agreed, and Ishmael was born, but this was not the promised child. It wasn't until Abraham was 100 years old, and Sarah was 90, that the promise of Isaac was finally fulfilled. God's timing was perfect, even when it didn't make sense to them. Abraham and Sarah's story is a profound reminder that we must not rush ahead of God. When we try to take control of the situation, we may end up creating something that isn't part of God's plan. But when we wait on His timing, even when it seems impossible or illogical, He will bring His promises to fruition. The waiting period was not wasted. It was during that time that Abraham and Sarah grew in their faith, and it was during that time that God proved His faithfulness in ways they could never have imagined. Billy Graham often reminded us that God's timing is always perfect. He knows the exact moment to bring about the breakthrough in our lives, and He will not be late. While we may be tempted to grow impatient or anxious, we must remember that God's delays are not denials. He is not ignoring our prayers or abandoning us in our waiting. He is working behind the scenes, preparing us for the breakthrough that He has already ordained. He is refining our hearts, building our perseverance, and strengthening our trust in Him. The story of Jesus and His disciples provides another example of God's perfect timing. In John 11, we read the account of the death of Lazarus. When Jesus received word that his friend Lazarus was sick, He didn't rush to him immediately. Instead, He stayed where he was for 2 more days. By the time He arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had already been dead for 4 days. His sisters Mary and Martha were devastated and confused. They had sent for Jesus because they believed He could heal Lazarus, and now He was too late. But Jesus had a greater plan in mind. He told them, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." John 11:4. When Jesus arrived, He performed the miracle of raising Lazarus from the dead. This was not just a healing. It was a powerful demonstration of God's power over death itself. Had Jesus arrived earlier, the miracle would have been impressive, but not as impactful as the resurrection of a man who had been dead for 4 days. God's timing was perfect, even when it seemed late to those involved. And through that miracle, many people came to believe in Jesus, and God's glory was revealed in a way that would not have happened without the waiting. This story is a reminder that even when we think God is late, He is never late. His timing is always aligned with His perfect will. We may not understand why things are happening the way they are, but we can trust that God is working in the background, orchestrating everything for our good and for His glory. Our breakthrough is coming, but it will come at the right time, the time when God will receive the most glory and when we will be most prepared to receive it. As we wait for our breakthrough, it's important to maintain a heart of trust. Trust that God knows what He is doing even when we don't have all the answers. Trust that His timing is better than ours. Trust that He is faithful to keep His promises. In Psalm 27:14, the psalmist writes to wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. This verse encourages us to wait with strength and courage, knowing that God is faithful and that His promises will be fulfilled at the right time. In the waiting, we are not passive. We are called to be active in our faith, praying, trusting, and persevering. But we must also be patient, knowing that God is working behind the scenes. Our breakthrough will come, but it will come when we are fully ready to receive it, and when God's glory will shine through it in the most powerful way. Billy Graham often spoke about the joy that comes after the waiting. He reminded us that while the waiting is hard, the breakthrough is worth it. And when we see the fulfillment of God's promises, we will look back and understand why the timing was perfect. God is not in a hurry. He is not bound by time as we are. And when the breakthrough comes, it will come with all the blessings, wisdom, and strength we need to handle it. So as we finish this journey together, remember that your breakthrough is not just about the result. It's about the process. It's about the transformation that takes place in your heart as you wait, as you trust, and as you persevere. Keep your eyes on Jesus and trust that His timing is always perfect. The breakthrough is coming, and it will be more than worth the wait.